You got it.
Cool. So welcome, guys. So Frank and I are mates. We happened to go to the same school together about 30 years ago. He went to the same life group as Claire 40 years ago.
Yes,
feels like
almost.
The same life group as Claire. He's a wonderful Christ follower that belongs to Jubilee in Cape Town, and we've kept in contact in social media for quite a while. I think you know Steve Rothwell quite well.
Yeah, I've spoken at Steve's church quite a few times. Yeah.
So most of our interaction is on Instagram about food photographs and stuff like that, to be honest. And just and knowing Frank's history in acting in front of cameras, etc., I just realized that for me personally, I was struggling to be as relaxed as I would be on a normal Sunday in front of people, in front of the congregation. So I just reached out to Frank and said, "Hey, you're a pro at this. You get paid to do this. Why don't you share some of your wisdoms with us as pastors? Most of us feel incredibly awkward and self-aware in front of a camera and there's no people." So the way this afternoon is going to run is Frank is going to share for 5-8 minutes or so just some of our heart, our head, how to prepare ourselves before even facing the camera and our preachers, and then some really practical skills that we can learn as part of that. And then after he's done a bit of a teaching, we'll keep our powder dry, and at the end we'll start asking questions and we'll do a bit of Q&A for 20 minutes. Is that all good? Everybody understand? Okay. So while Frank's going, and if there's anything that you think, wow, I'd love to ask that, can I just ask it for the sake of fluency? We just keep it for the end of his session, and then we all ask our Q&A. Cool. Over to you, my bud. I'm going to mute.
Cool. Awesome. So what I did was I jotted down some notes which I think would be helpful in terms of a camera performance and stuff. I just want to quickly kill that alarm that reminded me of this meeting. I'm back in. So if I do overlap things that you already know, things that you learned at seminary or whatever, please forgive me, but because I'm just assimilating what I know from my acting world and acting experience and trying to bring it into a practical sort of mode so that it'll be helpful to you guys. Okay, so here we go. One of the first things that I was saying to Honor, which I know, which I've experienced personally, is the reason why it's so hard and it makes you feel so drained or self-conscious when you're in front of a camera is because there's no one else there. So usually when you're standing in front of a live audience, you can kind of gauge where the audience is at. You maybe need to crack a joke to get them going, or you maybe need to kind of bring it down or lift the feeling. But now you have zero feedback. And that's often what we as actors, not often, that's how you always find yourself. When you're in a situation where you say, like doing an audition, you have no one giving you any feedback. So you have to prep yourself in such a way and use your imagination in such a way that you can create that scenario and be comfortable in it. So that's the first thing, is that you're not having any immediate feedback. That's why it's feeling so awkward. So the fact that it's feeling awkward, the first thing is it's okay. But the problem is that the minute you feel self-conscious in front of the camera, it reads. And the minute it reads as you feeling uncomfortable, whoever's watching it's going to feel uncomfortable. And when that happens, that's not a good situation, because then you're losing your audience. And it's really important not to lose your audience. So what I wanted to just do was jot down a few notes of how to prevent that from happening. And one of the things I remember from acting, and especially like auditions are just absolute, actors hate auditions. It's really tough to do auditions because you just get nothing from the people. A real life movie set, you get lots of feedback from the director and from your fellow actors and stuff. But one of the things that I've noticed is that when I'm properly prepped and when I'm doing a proper performance, I often can't remember what just happened. As soon as I say cut, I literally can't remember what happened. And that's really the goal of where we want to get you guys to, is that once you've delivered this thing, afterwards you don't have to think about it. You've left it all out there. And I've just found a few things that I'm going to start with just to help you with that. The first thing is a note from C.S. Lewis. It's very helpful. If you have the book Mere Christianity, you can go back and go and check it out. First thing C.S. Lewis says, even in social life, you will never make a good impression on other people until you stop thinking about what sort of impression you're trying to make. So the first thing I think in terms of getting yourself to relax is to stop worrying about how are people going to perceive me, how they're going to see me, what are they thinking about? Because the minute you do that, it's a little bit like a golfer going, oh, flip, there's a dam over there. There's a bunker over there. Oh, there's a hazard over here. And you've already shot yourself in the foot before you've even started. What you've got to do is you've got to do what Tiger Woods does. He says, I know exactly where I want to go, 2 foot left of the flag. And his focus is on that. And now his focus is no longer on the sort of the self-conscious environment. His focus is on what is he trying to do. So I would say that's one of the first things C.S. Lewis is going, don't think about what sort of impression this is making. Are people going to like it? Are they going to believe me? Have a game plan, 2 foot left of the flag. And once you have a game plan in mind, you don't have to worry about what sort of impression you're going to make. You're just going to make an impression, and that's okay. The next thing he leads into, he says, even in literature and in art, no man who bothers about originality will ever be original. Whereas if you simply try to tell the truth, without caring 2 pence how often it's been told before, you will 9 times out of 10 become original without even having noticed it. And that's what I was talking about earlier. Sometimes when I do a performance and I'm not worrying about what sort of impression I'm making, and I'm not trying to be original, I literally have a game plan and I just execute. That's why I can't remember it afterwards, because I've just left it all on the ground. And what he's talking about when he's saying the truth is that the truth is, again, I'm not trying to think how I'm trying to impress people. I'm prepped. I know what's right in my heart, and I'm going to deliver that. And then you become original without even having noticed it. And that whole quote is about not being self-conscious. Just to put it into a real practical example is when I was in LA, I used to be a cab driver. And one day this guy got in the car and he sat in the back seat and started speaking. He had the most incredible voice. And I snapped my head around to see who it was. And I said to him, you have the most incredible voice with cadence and everything I've ever heard. Have you ever done voiceover work? And he said to me, yes, I'm the voice of the Discovery Channel and also Primetime America. And I was like, oh my word, story time. And I said to him, so when did you discover this gift? How did you know? And he said, the funny thing was, he said, at school, I actually was a stutterer. I couldn't string 5 words together. I said, what? I said, where did it change? And he said, well, he was somewhere in junior high school or whatever. And he said they had a play and the teacher invited him to audition for the play along with all the other kids. And he got on the stage and she said, and action. And he tutted his way right. Took 10 minutes to get the thing out. And when he was done, she said, oh, well, that's great. I really liked what you did. And she walked up to him and she said, look, I'd like you to do it again, just without a stutter. So the character doesn't have a stutter. So if you can do it without a stutter, we're good. And he said he didn't stutter at all. Because the minute he took the attention off of himself and he played a character, the stutter disappeared. And he said from that point onwards, whenever he was at school and he would get nervous, he would just go into character, stutter would disappear, and eventually it completely disappeared. And he learned a lesson to take the attention off of himself and put it on his audience. And he became a well-known actor. You can look him up on YouTube. He's got the most incredible voice of discovery. So that's one of the things. Then the second thing that's going to help you take the attention off of yourself that I wanted to highlight was there's a woman by the name of Nancy Duarte. She's a speech specialist. She writes speeches for presidents, company CEOs, and so on in the US. And she wrote a book called Resonate. And it originated from having studied Steve Jobs, his I Have a New iPhone speech, and Martin Luther King Jr.'s I Have a Dream speech. And she took those 2 speeches and she put them on top of each other in terms of structure. And she said they were exactly the same structure. And one of the main things that stood out was she said both of those speeches made the audience the hero, not the speaker. The audience became the most important focus point in those speeches. In other words, Steve Jobs didn't brag about Apple. He spoke about how Apple can solve real issues in your life. And the same with Martin Luther King Jr. He didn't brag about how he wants to be president. He went, I have a dream, and it's a dream for you. And she said she realized a very important principle is that whenever you speak, the audience is the hero. Now, here's the thing that you guys are finding hard right now, is that when you're standing in front of an audience, you guys are experienced. You've been doing this for Sunday after Sunday for years. So you know how to do it. But all of a sudden now that element's been taken away. The principle, though, doesn't disappear. The audience has still got to be the hero. But now all of a sudden you feel like you're talking to a camera and you're not sure where you're at, how you're supposed to do it. The audience still remains the hero. And when they do, you come across as very comfortable in front of the camera and the most important thing, believable. The funny thing is you can speak a true word with as much sincerity as you possibly can. But if you're uncomfortable, it doesn't read as true and sincere. It reads as uncomfortable. And unfortunately, that's what the audience remembers. They don't care how you feel. They care about how you make them feel. And when you have that in your head, it really helps with taking the attention off of yourself. Going, it doesn't matter how I feel. They don't know how I feel. It doesn't matter. But what does matter is how I make them feel. And that's really important. A quick example that I can give you that I told Anna earlier, in the movie Rocky, I don't know if you guys remember Rocky from 1978, the original Rocky movie. About 5 minutes into the movie, Rocky's walking into a stadium and there's a guy sitting in the grandstand, just a random guy, and he keeps shouting, "Hey, Rocky! Hey, Rocky!" And Rocky turns around eventually and the guy looks at him and says, "You're a bum." Now, the reason why the movie makers put that in there is because that is the whole theme of the Rocky movie. Is Rocky a bum or isn't he? And now for the next hour, or hour and a half, they're going to prove to you he's one or the other. Because in the all is lost moment, Rocky's wife speaks to him. That's like 80 minutes into the movie. She says to him, "Rocky, why do you do this?" And he says, "I just want to prove I'm not a bum." Now, you've got to remember, in 1978, unemployed, petrol crisis, oil crisis, Philadelphia, all those guys are sitting in that audience and they're going, "Am I a bum? My dad's told me I'm a bum. But Rocky's not a bum and I'm Rocky." So the movie resonates with their hearts. And that's why I'm saying it's really, really key to think about your audience as the hero and how it makes them feel. So that's just the basic sort of philosophical outlook of I think what will be really helpful for you in front of a camera is to remember these things even though there isn't an audience. Okay. Now, some practical ideas, I guess. Eye contact. Don't let your eyes stray. Right now, I'm looking you guys straight in the eye through the camera. When I do a normal acting scene, I will never, ever look at the camera because there's a fourth wall between me and the audience. The audience gets to look at us doing something like this, me and another actor. And I never want to look in the camera because then I break the fourth wall and all of a sudden the audience member feels like, "Oh my word, they know I'm here." However, when you're a news presenter or someone who's presenting a sermon, you can't, the opposite plays. You can't break eye contact with the camera because the minute I'm busy looking at you guys now, and say, for instance, I'm saying, "For God so loved the world," and I do that to look at a note or something, immediately what happens in you and what happens in audience members, they go, "What are you looking at?" And they're distracted from what you're busy communicating. And literally, it's as subtle as this. If I'm saying, "For God so loved the world," and I look there and I look back, I've not even moved my head. But I know that immediately in you, you're going, "What is he looking at?" That's why in movies, like, what is looking at. Then as an audience member, you feel relaxed. So it's really what we say is that, and I know some of you guys into iPhone, so I'm not really practicing what I can't get a bit comfortable. Max, look at their shoulder. Otherwise, it's too distracting. The audience is immediately going to ask where you're looking. So I think in terms of camera, sometimes when you're looking into a camera, maybe you could look at the sort of, say this is the camera, you're looking in there, you can maybe look at the bottom part of the lens, but not more than that. And like I said, you must experiment. Just whatever you do, don't look away because it's so distracting, especially in a sermon where you want people to follow you. The minute you look away, I'm going, is someone calling this person? Did something happen? Did a burglar just come through the door? I mean, people's imaginations are wild. So that's just not going to be helpful. I just want to quickly look at my notes here. Because again, don't forget your audience. Remember what you're experiencing isn't that important. It's what they're experiencing watching you. That's the key. Okay. I think something I said to Anna earlier was that maybe it'll be helpful if your notes are visible. Like Stephen, we're part of Jubilee, so we watched you on Sunday, and it was great. I really enjoyed it, and then I'll get to a really a compliment I want to give you, which I thought was very good. Like if I'm holding my papers like this, right, and I'm saying to you guys, I'm busy talking to you, for God so loved the world, and he gave his only begotten son, and then look back up again. It's not that distracting because you know what I'm looking at. So it doesn't really distract the audience. But if I'm going, for God so loved the world, and I'm looking up at maybe a TV or teleprompter that tells me the rest, then it's distracting. So I think one of the things you can maybe do if you need your notes or if you're reading your sermon or whatever, is to have them just visibly so that I know what you're looking at and I don't feel distracted. The other thing is there's a teleprompter app. I can't remember. Just give me a second. I'm just going to go away for 1 second. It's a free, you literally can Google, it's called cueprompter.com, CUE prompter.com. It's one word. It's a free teleprompter app. And maybe, that'll be helpful. That's what newsreaders use. And that's why they never have to look away because they're looking at the teleprompter. I mean, it works really good. It scrolls by itself. You can have someone pause it at any point. So that might be a helpful way of not getting, too distracted. Then the second or the fourth point I want to make is, so that was eye contact. Please stay in the camera. The fourth point is be prepped. And the most important word for me in the prep, I would say there is structure. Have your structure worked out really, really well. And what I mean by structure is have two bookends of your sermon. Like the before, like in movies, we have what they call an opening image. And that tells you the movie, and then you get right to the end and you have what they call the closing image. The closing image is like the opening image, but the whole world is changed. And I think that'll really help you in terms of, the importance of keeping the sermon tight, particularly on camera. And the reason is that when you're on stage, you can wing it. I mean, I know I've spoken a lot in public, and often on stage, you can wing it, you can get away with it or whatever. But with camera, this is all you got. You can't wing it. You can't even look away from the camera. So I would say the pressure that you're feeling in front of them way more than the pressure you're feeling on the stage, in particular because you're used to standing on the stage and speaking in front of people. But, not again. And one thing I do know is that whenever I have experienced not being prepped properly for an audition, for a scene, for whatever, it's just not worth it. The pressure's just too much. You just don't get across what you need to get across. So I would say just prep a bit more than you normally would. Again, like Tiger Woods, have a plan. Know what you're aiming for. Stop thinking about the bunkers and the hazards on the right and the left. It doesn't matter. Just make sure that the structure of your sermon is really tight. And that's where Steve, I wanted to really give you a compliment on that. I've really enjoyed the way you lay out your sermons in terms of structure because it's very clear. And you know what the telltale sign is from a congregant? I can remember what you said. That's the key, is I can remember what was said. And that's really important. So structure, super important. And point number 4, it's not about you. That's one of the things we always talk about in acting is you can't make it about you. It's about the audience that's watching what you're doing. The minute you make it about you, you push me out of it. Like, for instance, I'll give you a simple example. In a scene, if it's a scene where there's a lot of humor, if any of the actors in the scene laugh too much, what we talk about is they've stolen the audience's laugh. Now the audience doesn't laugh anymore. And it's the same with crying. If you get too emotional in the scene, you get so emotional, you push the audience out. And oftentimes, the best emotional scenes is when you play against it. You have to play against it. Like one of the most emotional scenes I've ever seen It's the one I always cite, is Emma Thompson in Love Actually. I don't know if you guys can remember that movie or seen that movie, where she finds out her husband is busy, he's committing adultery. And she opens the little box and she sees the gift that she thought she was going to get is actually for the mistress. And then she looks at the kids and she says to them, listen, Mummy just got to go upstairs quickly. And she goes upstairs and she tries to put powder on her face, but the tears are just running. And she's just trying to stop it. That is such a tough scene to watch because she's not stealing the audience. Now the audience feels empathy for her. And I think it's in the same way when you think about prepping your sermon and when you're delivering your sermon, create space for your audience to be able to receive it, especially when you're on camera. It's really important to create space for them to receive it. Okay, point number 6, we only got 2 more. Imagination. I don't know if this has ever come into your vocabulary or not, but it's a wonderful gift God has given us. Imagination is an incredibly powerful tool for emotional honesty. That's one thing that you'll know is that when you're emotionally honest, it's such a powerful way to communicate to someone's heart and to get past their heads. And imagination can really, really help you out with that. I'll give you an example of what I mean by that. One of the things you need to do is you need to imagine who you're speaking to, because here's the key. What you think in your heart reflects in your eyes. And that's something you don't necessarily have to think so much about when you're on a stage and there's no cameras. Trust me, what you think in your heart reflects in your eyes. Editors always talk about this. They talk about the dance of the eyes. When an editor is editing a movie or a TV show, they're looking at a bunch of things, but the most important thing, or probably in the top 3 things that they're looking at, is what's going on in the actor's eyes. Because that's the dance that the audience is going to experience. So now you can imagine if it's that important in a movie, how important it's not going to be for the way you're speaking straight into a camera is what you think in your heart, okay, reads in your eyes. So, like the scripture says, well, how a man thinketh in his heart, so easy, right? Another way of, not another way of saying it, but in terms of acting, what you think in your heart reads in your eyes. And if you're thinking uncomfortable, if you're thinking angry, if you're thinking happy or whatever, that's what the audience sees. It reads, and you can't get away from it. The camera looks straight past your eyeballs, straight into your heart. And we often, this is a funny way of how we describe it, in soap operas, they always have these like 10-second hold shots at the end. And we used to talk about smelling the fart. Because first of all, when you smell a fart, you're taking the consciousness off of yourself. So you're like, but you could be happy smelling a fart. You can be angry. You could be in love. Yeah, it's just, all I did was change my thinking. I didn't change my mouth. I didn't change anything. I just changed what I thought in my heart. In the same way, I remember the one time I learned a big lesson about 25, 30 years ago. When I first started out, there was an American actor out here, and the director asked us to chew chewing gum. It was a chewing gum commercial. And he said, just eat a piece of gum. And you know what this guy did was, because everyone just sat there eating a piece of gum. What he did was he went, this is my angry chew. This is my happy chew. This is my bored chew. This is my whatever. And all he the same chew, but his eyes changed. And that's what the camera looks at. It doesn't care what you're chewing or how clever you are with your, information or whatever it is. But it's looking at your eyes and it knows what you're thinking. So be very because that'll help you think. And what I mean with imagination is, I remember when I was doing some scenes in Faith Like Potatoes, I literally just had a camera in my face, nothing else. But I'm speaking to a stadium full of people, and I'm speaking something extremely emotive, like, Lord, forgive us our trespasses, or, as a nation, we repent before you. And I literally just had to imagine in my heart all the people that are sitting in front of the TV watching this movie, how am I making them feel? And the minute I felt something in my heart, it read in my eyes. And it's as simple as that. And it's something you got to practice. Like everything I'm telling you now is from years and years of trial and error. But, at least it's a start, and just practice these things. And I can't tell you how effective it is if you think in your heart and reach in your eyes. Okay, last thing, appearance, real practical one.
Frank, before you shoot the last one, can I ask you to try and go for like a minute so that we've got 10 minutes where we can ask you some questions? So, okay, cool.
Yeah, 100, yeah. The last one's very quick. It's an army of makeup artists and stylists. They're on a set for a reason. And again, the main reason is not because they're trying to make you look good or hot or whatever, because the director knows if there's a hair out of place, it doesn't matter how emotional the scene is, everyone's going to be looking at the hair. I remember I did a scene once in a TV show where I had to cry. It was a super emotional scene, and I nailed it. I mean, the scene was cooking, and then like literally the director went, cut. I was like, what? Bro, I'm killing it. It's going well. And he's saying there's a massive snolly running down the side of your lip. And he's like, no one wants to eat their dinner and watch you in that show. And we had to cut it, and I had to wipe it off and do it again. And that's what I'm trying to say is like, be conscious of your appearance. And the reason why you put makeup on is so your forehead doesn't reflect the lights, so you don't shine. Also, the other thing is, if you're like, I have a huge problem with my nose. I surfed, Anna knows this, I surfed like a crazy person, and I burnt my nose to pieces when I was a kid. And so my nose always reads red on camera, so I have to cover it with makeup. And it's just to make it even. So again, nothing to distract from what you're trying to communicate. Okay, done.
Brilliant, Frank. That is super helpful. There was one thought I had on the audience. The one thing I noticed that I started doing, I used to love doing it if I'm preaching live, asking questions, even rhetorical questions to the audience. Even if I don't want an answer, sometimes I do want them to answer. And I realized that going before a camera, I've stopped doing it. You stop almost remembering that there's an audience that gets provoked or engaged by rhetorical questions, etc. So a little note I made, when you spoke about the audience, is, hey, remember, it's still okay to ask questions, even though they're not sitting in front of you. They can still at home go, oh yeah, I can remember that, or that's great. Anybody else? I'm going to keep quiet for a while.
Yeah, I just thought that stuff on kind of being other aware is just so critical. And Keller's also just written the short little book on the art of self-forgetfulness. And I just, it's a gospel imperative. We focused on God and the gospel, which means that the locus of what we're speaking about shouldn't be ourselves. And I just thought that was just such a helpful insight, Frank.
Yeah, and even if you are using an example from your own life, the best compliment I get from people, or at least that I think from people, is when they come to me after and say, go, yes, dude, thanks for sharing that story, because that's exactly what happened to me. And I know it didn't happen to the Oak and Amanzimtoti, what happened to me in Los Angeles. But what has happened is that the story God is telling through my life, he's telling also through that guy's life. So it's not a thing that's focused on me. It's rather, it's focused on God and the story God's telling in our lives. Does it make sense?
Also kind of found it helpful that you said, let them see your notes if you need to do that, because in terms of doing it, I can't just do it like a half an hour just straight from memory. There are little kind of triggers that I need. But that was kind of helpful, saying, well, then just let that be visible to them.
Yeah, that or a teleprompter, whatever you can do to not look away from the camera is very helpful. Because again, like I said, if you're looking at something that the audience can't see, that takes them out of the moment. And the last thing you want, you don't want them out of the moment. That's the reason why you don't want them looking away, why you don't want to look away.
The other thing that I also found difficult is when people are filming and other people come in, I tend to notice them, just because as a preacher, you're so used to engaging with who's actually in the room. I almost found it impossible not to do that.
I'm so glad you brought that up. It is impossible not to do that. And so therefore, when you record, please keep your environments quiet. Honestly, on film sets, you will literally get fired for walking through a shot while the camera is rolling. Or if your cell phone goes off, you get a couple of warnings, and then you get fired. It's just too hard. So keep your film sets closed, or at least don't let people come in and out. Because trust me, the best actors in the world, it's almost impossible to stay focused when people are walking in and out. So
Frank,
keep close.
Can I just ask about framing? I mean, do you recommend having a close-up with sort of head and shoulders, or having it further away, or what are the do's and don'ts of framing the picture?
That really comes down to personal taste. I would say MCU, which is medium close-up, which is like half your chest. That's helpful for communication. But I think also I like the way that they frame Stephen's frame, because he's got a notice board next to him on the side. And I think it's more of a preaching thing, whereas, like an MCU would be more of a performance acting type thing. Like a newsreader is MCU. You see that you see sort of a part of their chest and their head type thing like that. Whereas I think the way Stephen had it with is a bit of a pulse, but you can still see the TV. I think that's a good example,
Yeah, thanks. It makes it easier for the audience to see the notes too. Yeah,
absolutely. And remember, you also got to remember what are you guys doing? What are you trying to communicate? Well, you're trying to communicate a sermon and notes and stuff. So that's very appropriate. Yeah.
Frank, having kind of listened to stuff, would you advise us to change our register? I mean, I think I've kind of tried to kind of be more conversational. Do you think as you move to the camera thing, lean more into that for us as preachers versus what we would sound like on a Sunday to a live audience?
Absolutely, because remember, the TV screen is only this big, right? And so a lot of big movement is distracting. So in terms of movement, keep it small, and then also in terms of speaking, like conversational, I think that's a good sort of cadence to go for. I mean, if you get excited, like Lex gets quite animated and excited, but I didn't feel distracted by it because it felt right for his personality. But I think confidence is really the thing that you got to hit. Speak with confidence. And again, you're speaking to an audience, and also you're in this size frame. So speak to that. You're not on a stage. You're not having to project. Remember, you've got a microphone as well. So I think, conversational is a good note. Anybody else? We've got 3 minutes and a half, I think. I think you can restart the call if you're desperate for another conversation. I think they just cut you off after 40, but then restart. Yeah.
Maybe just a little bit on the background and kind of. I see you've got some pictures and a dark wall behind you. Was that intentional?
Yeah, this is my audition wall. The reason why I have a dark wall, it's a gray wall, but the reason why I do is because I've got light. Let me just do this. I've got a good source of light. Let me just get my computer out from that window. And I have a good source of light from that window. And so with the dark wall, as you can see, the lighting's, it's pretty good. I mean, this is more sort of set up for, because I had to do an audition earlier today, so it's more sort of set up for an audition. But the one thing you don't want, this is a classic example. Like, imagine how good that's going to work, how that's going to totally not be distracting, right? See what I mean? Immediately your attention's drawn there and it's not here anymore, no matter how good I am or whatever I say, Or, so background's really important. Plain, I mean, I like Jubilee's background. It's a plain brick wall, very clean. Just any doesn't cause distraction. And again, that just comes down to think about your audience. How are they experiencing what they see? Because remember, like on Sunday, Lee and I just sit in the lounge on a couch. We've got the TV on. We've got quite a big 55-inch TV. And we just really pumped to hear the sermon because it's long lockdown times. And I think really at the heart of it, the audience just wants to be loved well. A word that's going to give them encouragement and speak to where they're at. Again, like I said, the best marketing is not bragging about your company. The best marketing is how do you solve the problem I'm struggling with, So,
Cool, guys. Yeah, unless there's any big questions, Frank, I was going to say thank you for being available to us, my brother. This is like super helpful, things that we've never thought of on our own. Yeah, I think it is. It's like it's new ground for all of us, and
yeah.
to be able to learn from someone that's used to it, even if we took 2 or 3 things, it'd be super helpful. I've recorded this, so I'm gonna try and get it onto YouTube. I'll send you all the link, and you can share it with your mates
Okay.
if you think it's
Yeah.
helpful. All good? Thanks, Frank. Thanks, everybody.
Yeah, anytime, man. You got it, guys.
Have a great
All the
weekend.
best for your next recordings.